Welcome to Sponsored Post Podcast, behind the lens of how influential content is made. I am Justin Moore. I'm the founder and CEO of Trending Family, which is an influencer marketing agency that launches campaigns with family-friendly influencers. Today, I am so excited to be joined by Alexander DeRitter, who is the co-founder and chief innovation officer of both INK and Edgy Labs. Welcome, Alexander.
Thank you, Justin. Nice to be here.
So nice to have you. And so I thought we could start it off. Why don't you tell me a little bit about what INK is and how you got interested in building this product?
Awesome. Well, INK is a web content intelligence tool that empowers writers to self-optimize digital content for search. And as far as how we got interested in building this product, a few years back, Michael and Gary and myself decided to create a company. And we wanted to build something awesome, but we didn't know yet what we're going to build. We started by saying, hey, no matter what company we're going to build, we're going to need an audience. So we put a blog together and said, hey, let's just build an audience. That turned out to be very successful.
What type of audience did you build out of curiosity? What was the site and the type of content you were creating?
You know what? I think we called it content for nerds with degrees. We figured nerds would be aware of what's going on in the fourth industrial revolution. And if they had degrees and they were nerds, they probably had a good job or something, and we could build a product that they would like at some point. So that was kind of the thesis. It was funny because at that time, we didn't yet know what we were going to offer. And I had a conversation with Michael, my co-founder. I'm very interested to build a product company. But as far as offering services, anything but an SEO company, please. Michael was like, why? You're good at this. And I'm like, yeah, exactly. That's why, because I always feel like financial advisors and SEOs, I always feel it's fake, because if you know how to do SEO, why would you do it for anyone else? You would just make all the money in the world, right? Because you would rank whatever you want.
Is SEO still a dirty word, you think?
It's coming around.
Mm-hmm. And so you built this blog, you started developing an audience, and then where did the genesis of INK start? And how did you make that jump from creating content that was compelling to, okay, now we have an idea about this product we want to create?
Yeah, I think it came very early on. The reinforcement began as we started going through our network and started meeting people. I'm very resourceful. I can build just about anything. My background's computer science, and I've helped dozens and dozens of companies get off the ground and build their tools for them. So that was never the problem. What we wanted mutually was find a real world problem that was worthy of our time, right? And very early on, we started talking to people and asking them, what is your biggest problem? What is the biggest problem you have in your business? And we wanted to hear from them what they were struggling with. In our conversations, it went something like this, actually quite literally like this. What is it that you could do? Oh, we could do this or that. Tell me a little bit about what you've done so far. Oh, well, we launched the blog and we had these crazy results and traffic. Stop right there. I want that.
Mm-hmm.
And so, I would look to Michael and it was like eye roll. It's like, remember, I said no SEO company.
Right.
But everybody kept on pointing out to us, this was one of the biggest problems they were struggling with. So before long, we were introduced to a Fortune 10 company, massive global company. And we found out they were struggling with the same kind of challenges around content creation and how to optimize it. And that was a few months later. We got a very large SEO contract. We flew to California, sat in this meeting with this behemoth of an agency. They took us through their content creation process, like a 250-step flow chart. I'm sure somewhere in that flow chart, it was like print the document, then take the elevator to the fourth floor and put it in somebody's physical inbox. It was elaborate.
Right.
We had all the reinforcement we needed. At the same time, we had been developing, this theory around how Google ranks content, and validated that on ourselves first, then for our clients with tremendous success. Million more visitors a month on these enterprise sites. That counts.
And so walk me through the logic. I mean, because if you've got Fortune 10 companies willing to give you these lucrative partnerships, walk me through the logic of why you thought it would be more compelling to build a kind of lower funnel tool for the masses as opposed to, I mean, I know you say you don't want to have an SEO company, but did you find a greater purpose behind building a tool like this and that it could be impactful for a lot more people?
Yeah, I think the realization, it really started coming together, once we really understood how big the problem was in the market, how many people needed this, and eye-opening to see that some of the biggest agencies in the world, very large respected companies and agencies, are struggling with the same problems that you and I are struggling with as content creators. That was very eye-opening. And then the other part of it is that we always wanted to build a product company. That was always the goal from the beginning. And so by having the agency experience and the services experience and validation, we were able to also self-fund our software ambitions, right? And we're an entirely bootstrapped company. The reason why lower funnel is because this is funny. Michael and I often have this debate like, why are you in it? What's your purpose? I'm in it for the glory, right? I want a lasting legacy. I want something that when people ask me, what do you do? And I say, oh, I'm the maker of ink. I want people to go like, oh yeah, I use ink. I love ink. That's what makes me wake up in the morning. And we realized there was just a massive need for this, and software scales very easily. So that's why we started there. If you look at Microsoft and business services, it is massive in the business world. But if you look where they started in terms of productivity, it's all about Office, and Office started with Word. You look at Adobe, I think they did like 10 billion revenue a year or a quarter, some massive number. And you look where they began, and Acrobat, a tool for content creators, and Photoshop, a tool for content creators. And they take that into the workplace and then become this large offering for enterprise at some point.
So I think one thing that is very challenging for most marketers, and I'm sure a lot of the folks listening to this podcast, is, you have the whole process of creating content, but then equally important to that, or maybe even more important to that, is getting eyeballs on it, right? Like, how are you going to get that content seen? And it sounds like those are some of the challenges that you're trying to help with. And so from some of the initial conversations that we've had, it sounded like there was this hypothesis that you formed about some of these kind of next generation algorithms and tactics that Google and other search engines were going to be implementing in the coming months and years with respect to natural language and just SEO ranking in general. I was wondering if you could speak to that a little bit.
Yeah, for sure. So prior to starting Edgy Labs, I had spent about 8 years developing machine learning algorithms. And actually, some of my engineers ended up working for Google. Although we were working in a different field, I saw this emergence of neural networks. What changed is machine learning became more about AI because of neural networks. And, there's people who are going to say, well, true AI has still not been achieved. And, it's just a philosophical debate. The difference is that in machine learning, you were training the computer to look for things. And with the neural networks, the computer decides for itself what it deems important and whatnot. At the same time, having a background in marketing and user psychology, I understood with our team early on that Google was going to apply those same innovations for search. There was no other way. And having this background, you ask yourself the question, how will this impact search? How would Google use these techniques to get smarter? And that is basically the hypothesis that kind of started everything.
Interesting. And so we talked a little bit at the top of the podcast about SEO being a dirty word. And I was wondering if you could walk us through a little bit about kind of the history of SEO. How has it changed, or how will it change? Maybe even a little bit more basic than that. Like, what exactly does it do? How does it help? What are the basics that most marketers need to know about SEO?
Right. So where it started It basically started when the information on the web started to accumulate really fast, and people needed an easy way to find and sort through massive amounts of information. Google's company purpose statement is help to organize the world's information and make it accessible. I probably messed it up a little bit, but that's the spirit of it. And so what we have seen is initially Google figured out that content that was spoken well of by other people was probably more trustworthy. So, Justin, if I were looking for advice on influencers and so forth, and maybe I get four people I really respect to say, hey, Justin Moore, you got to go talk to him, right? Well, that's a good recommendation. And that's how Google started out, is basically building this reputation or page rank algorithm that was based on trust. And the way they measured that was with links. So that's really where it started. Over time, people started gaming the links. SEOs figured out, hey, I can spam a bunch of links and make Google think I'm important. So it became harder for Google to determine what was real and what was not. And links alone was not cutting it anymore. Google realized that the content on what's on a page mattered as well. So Google then started employing algorithms that would basically just count words pretty much. Do you have this word in your text? If so, you are more relevant. What people started doing then was stuffing their content with the keywords that they want to rank for in kind of this unnatural, unuser friendly kind of mixture. And they would do stuff like put white text on white background to make it seem to Google that the content is more relevant than it is. So what Google started doing is analyze the content deeper, and they started relying on more statistical methods for a while. And ultimately, when neural networks came around, I realized, hey, this is going to be how Google will scan content and determine if it is really relevant or if it is just keyword stuffing. And that is kind of where we are today. Today, Google is really good at understanding what content is about. Google BERT is just the latest improvement, and it's really not that new. It's just new in the sense that it's another step up. It affects like 10% of searches. But one thing people have to keep in mind is that Google results are meant to show up on your screen in like a quarter of a second. And there are trillions of pieces of content out there. So any algorithm improvement has to be extremely performant, or it would be cost prohibitive for Google to analyze it, right? And so what made BERT so big news, is that it was a very efficient way to understand what content is about. It's all trending towards this idea that Google is trying to feed people the most relevant search results for anything that you might be searching for.
I mean, talk about that tension a little bit, right? Between kind of the platform algorithm authors and content creators. Maybe not necessarily the people who are trying to game it necessarily, but at least on YouTube, this sounds very familiar to the gripes of content creators and a frustration behind never really knowing whether their content is going to be, number one, served to the people who have asked to be subscribed to them, or suppressed in search, or whether their video will be shown in the recommended feed on YouTube in particular. We deal in influencer marketing a lot. And so these are a lot of the things that people say. I mean, YouTube has had these issues in the past too, with like clickbait and, YouTube thumbnails not actually being related to the actual content itself, and them having to make algorithm tweaks all the time and things like that. And so talk a little bit about, creators are always trying to understand how Google or YouTube are ranking content so they can perform better. And so is it futile to constantly monitor all these changes that the platforms make? And would that time be better spent kind of investing in the quality of your content, or how do you view that?
All right, lots to unpack there. Let me start with the last part of your question. Is it futile to constantly monitor all the changes the platforms are making? I would say it is a bit of a waste of time. You want to focus on your strength. And as content creators, that is creating great content. monitoring all the changes the platforms are making, that's a very time consuming effort that would basically put you on the path to become an SEO.
I mean, there's entire YouTube channels that have made a living analyzing every small change that YouTube has made.
Absolutely. But the truth is that for all of the companies that are out there and all of the advice people give you on how to optimize and so forth, nobody has quite figured out what makes something go viral and what doesn't go viral. You may think you finally have the formula after something has a bit of a success, and then you try to replicate it and it doesn't have the same impact. You're far better off focusing on your audience and genuinely creating amazing content than following every little algorithm change that those search engines are making. And yes, YouTube is a search engine for video. Now, one thing I will want to really share with you and the audience is put yourself in the shoes of Google for a moment. What is their business model? So when people find what they are looking for on Google, they use the search engine more often. Why do more people use Google than Bing? Because Google more often gives you what you're looking for than other search engines. That's really the main reason. So if more people use your search engine, then more people will click your ads. If more people click your ads, you make more money. And so the same logic applies for YouTube. If more people watch your video for a longer period of time, then YouTube makes more money, right? So the core of it is for Google search is how do you give people what they are really looking for? Because when you do that, you're giving Google search what it is looking for. And if you are thinking about YouTube, how do you make your videos engaging so that people want to spend a sufficient time with your content? And if you do that, then Google makes more money from ad revenue as well. So instead of the cat and mouse game that SEO has traditionally been, it is becoming an alignment where both our goals align. And no matter how many search engine algorithm updates will be deployed, you will always be at the receiving end of a benefit as long as you focus on quality content, because this is what they make money off. So their algorithms will always be geared towards improving that.
When a creator creates a piece of content, let's say a blog post or something, what percentage of effort should be applied to the creation versus the distribution and the strategy around how to reach the most people?
Actually, there's a very important step that you've left out, which most people ignore, but it's half the battle. And most of the effort should be spent on competitive research before you start. You know, Sun Tzu, the art of war is to understand your opponent and yourself. So a lot of times people create content for topics that they have no domain authority for. And when two people create content on the same topic, but one has great domain authority and the other has no domain authority for that topic, the chances of ranking and getting exposure is very small. So the first step should be determining the topics that you can actually compete for brand authority wise. So once you find those topics that you can compete for, then the next step is to look at what the best content is right now for that topic. And then you start the content creation process with the goal of producing an even better piece of content for that topic.
Interesting. And so you believe that those three steps are of equal importance?
I have seen spectacular results from purely organic efforts. Recently, we performed a test with our ink editor and we wrote 5 pieces of content, each piece targeting 4 to 5 key phrases. And we optimized it. First of all, we chose those topics based on what we could compete for on our domain expertise authority. And we wrote it in our software, inkforall.com. And we had given the writers instructions to score 90% or higher. Then we published these pieces of content, and out of 24 total key phrases, within a week, 13 of those were already ranking in Google without any link building. So what we're saying basically, and what our premise is at Edgy, or philosophy for services, and the philosophy behind the product is any kind of promotion, link building, and so forth, if it does not come organically, if it does not come naturally, your enemy is Google, because Google's entire purpose for determining your true authority is to sorting out what is real and what is fake. So put more effort into your research and put most of your effort into creating amazing content. And over time, you will gain domain authority in an organic, natural way. And you will find that even though you have fewer links, the organic links and authority you will create are going to carry much farther than any kind of manipulation or trying to force Google will yield you.
Super fascinating. Talk a little bit about, why do you think SEO is important when brands work with influencers? Because, I mean, from an influencer's perspective, the biggest motivation, I think, to performance is just repeat business, right? If they create content for a client and it performs really well organically, whether it's organic only or there's some paid amplification behind it on social or something, that just really bodes well for the future of the relationship. But most brands don't really consider SEO. I think when they work with influencers, it's quite transactional, right? They like hire them. Hey, I want you to post about my, lunch meet or something, and post on Instagram and do a blog post and all that stuff. But SEO is kind of an afterthought. And so in your assessment, why do you think they need to be considering SEO?
Well, I think there's a challenge for influencers, and that challenge is telling the story around return on investment. Sure, you can see that I posted about your brand, and yes, I have followers. Most of them are real, I assure you. But measuring the true ROI is often a difficult conversation. So, what if influencers could, by the type of content they generate, tell their people and brands hiring them that their content has longevity, that their content is searched for, sought out, and generates traffic even after the transactional portion of the engagement has completed? That greatly improves the value of the work that influencers are providing their clients. And SEO is a key way to keep in mind when you create great content. Make sure that it is found.
Yeah, I mean, one of the tactics that we've always encouraged our clients to do is, let's say they hire some influencers to create some great videos and imagery and things like that. The influencers go ahead and post it on their platforms to leverage their audience. But then a lot of clients just do not repurpose the content, right? And so one thing that we really encourage is, hey, like, why don't we throw up a landing page, brand.com/influencer XYZ, feature the content, have a little profile photo, a bio of the influencer, create some, paragraphs of talking about the partnership and things like that. I mean, we've found that to be effective, but from an SEO perspective, do you think that that brand doesn't have enough, like you said, subject or domain expertise about the influencer to rank in search? If one of the influencer's followers is searching for the, more information about the influencer on Google or something like that, does that make sense?
Yeah, so repurposing content from influencers is an amazing way to do SEO. But I would encourage you to always create content with an intent. Always ask the question, who would benefit from visiting this page? What questions would a person visiting this page find answers to? And think through search for a moment. What would people be searching for in Google where this piece of content would be the best answer to what they're searching for? If you create content by just repurposing it, but without intent, you are going to get lucky once in a while, and something is going to rank in Google. But if you create content with a purpose, with intent behind it, you're going to magnificently improve your results.
Interesting. So walk me through the process flow of how a brand would use INK, because there's a lot of SEO plugins like on WordPress, for example, right? And I think a process flow for a lot of brands is they just take the copy, they plop it right in their WordPress CMS, and they see how they score. But they don't really use the plugin or WordPress or anything to actually do the content creation. But it sounds like Ink, from my understanding, creating the content in that ecosystem is useful in real time, not just after the fact. Is that the case?
Yeah, so Ink is different than any other tool for a number of reasons. One is that SEOs are not really happy. We made our AI research in a product that is mainly geared towards content creators. They're like, why didn't you make a tool for us SEOs? And my answer is like, there's enough tools for you, and the content creators are the ones who need it the most.
Right.
So when you're a content writer, there is nothing really else out there for you, made for you, that can do anything like what Ink is doing for you. And if you are an SEO, you may know a few tools, SEO plugins, SEO dashboards, and so forth. They're generally not really created for content writers, but even there, they do not really account for Google getting so smart, neural network smart, that when you really look at those tools and what they do, they're counters. They count how many times you use a word. They count and tell you based on a rule they figured out. But one size does not apply to all. Google is more individualized than ever. Use this word 2 more times and include that word. No, content is supposed to be extremely engaging for one main topic. And if you do that, that's where you're going to rank in Google. So what Ink is doing, it's a writing tool for writers. If you write in Ink, you're going to get real-time insight into what Google's looking for. It in real-time reverse engineers what Google wants, and it will compare that with your text, and it will create helpful, easy to-dos and say, this is what you need to change for Google to like you. And by the way, this is how much Google will like your content and give you a score.
One general piece of feedback that I get from a lot of influencers that we speak with is that there's just a massive proliferation or maybe a saturation in the amount of content that is created on all platforms, right? Whether it's long form written content, whether it's video content, whether it's people trying to be influencers on social platforms only. What do you think are the implications of this just explosion of the amount of content created, and what those implications will be for trying to show up in the first page of Google search results, right? Because that's the goal of pretty much everyone, right? But if there's all this content being created, will that be harder to be seen?
Absolutely. Yeah, that's the entire reason why Google needs to get smarter to filter out the noise. So every day, 4 million blog posts are written.
Insane.
4 million. And guess what percentage of them will never see traffic from Google?
93%.
Very close. 91% will never see traffic. And then another 5% will see almost no traffic.
Wow.
So as a writer, your question is, how do you know if your content is good enough for Google? And so I would make 2 recommendations to our audience. Is number 1, if there is a lot of great content from very reputable sources already available, it's very hard to rank for that. It's very hard to be seen. But do your research. If you have a niche, go in a micro niche. Talk about an angle or a variation of the topic that nobody quite really has covered. Create unique content. Add to the conversation. Don't just repurpose other people's content. Make it more useful. And that will get you traffic and will build your reputation. So start with the research. Number 2, if you have found such a topic, understand what Google is looking for. Ink is a free product. There's no reason why you wouldn't write in Ink. You can get real-time feedback and have an idea of how Google will like your content.
So what is the future for Ink in general? Obviously it's text-based right now, but what's on the horizon for, let's say, audio and video SEO? With the explosion of voice assistants and, we live oftentimes in the world of video where, video content creators are trying to figure out what they can do to optimize their content. So paint me a vision of the future.
Yeah. So video and audio have a big advantage over text. And that is, this content is more engaging. It's easier to consume. You can plug in a podcast in your car while on the drive. You don't need to stare at a screen to consume it. And people tend to engage with it for a longer period of time than with text, which requires more sustained effort to consume, right? And so that is really the benefit of those media. However, in terms of algorithm design and how Google has to interpret these things, it is important to understand that audio and video are reduced to text for search engine purposes. Google transcribes your audio and transcribes your videos and uses character recognition to see the text that you display in the video and so forth. Ultimately, interprets the video and audio in the same way that it analyzes all content. You can use INK today on your audio scripts and your video scripts to understand what Google might want to rank. And we see that on the horizon, something that your audience may not have seen yet in practice, but it's coming, is video featured snippets. An example, I believe, is how to braid your hair. And Google would return video as a featured snippet. And when you click on it, it's already going to show you the portion of the video where you exactly go and show the steps. It skips the intro, it skips the commercial at the end. It just shows you that little snippet of video, of content that is relevant to what the user is looking for, showing that the same principles are really applied towards text, audio, and video. It boils down to the same thing. And in terms of how INK looks at the future of performance, we think of it as content performance optimization. And that really has three pillars. Great content needs to be found, because if nobody sees it, it doesn't achieve the purpose, right? Number two, great content needs to be engaging. If content is found but users don't engage with it, you lose their interest. You might as well not have created the content. So great content needs to engage. And number three, great content converts. And conversion is not always an exchange of dollars. It can be an exchange of ideas as well. So great content is found, is engaging, and converts. And that is the mission and future of INK. And so the future features that we are going to release are going to very much be centered around content performance optimization, or CPO.
Super fascinating. Well, Alexander, thank you so much for joining me today. How can people start using INK? How can they contact you? That kind of thing.
All right. So inkforall.com is our site. It's a free download for Windows and Mac. And as far as contacting me, you could use INK and leave a feedback message inside the app. I will see it. Or you can contact one of our customer support people and chat on INK. You can also find me on LinkedIn. Everyone who hears this, feel free to add me on LinkedIn, Alexander de Ritter. Happy to have a chat with you.
Fantastic. Well, thank you so much again. You've just listened to the Sponsored Post podcast with your host, Justin Moore. You can subscribe to hear more great interviews and episodes via Apple and Google Podcasts, Stitcher, or wherever you get your podcasts. For more information on Trending Family, you can visit trendingfamily.com. See you next time.